Welcome to Talk Tuesday, a series dedicated to empowering youth and families. This series is brought to you by Steps Foundation Incorporated, where advocacy meets education for the betterment of young minds. I'm Amaya Warren McCaskill, your host and peer educator at Steps Foundation Incorporated. This month, we're honoring a group of unsung heroes, family caregivers, especially the teens who balance caregiving with school, friends, and their personal lives. In our Family Caregiver Month series, we'll be exploring the unique challenges caregivers face, discussing ways to balance caregiving with personal life, connecting you with vital resources, and celebrating the hard work and dedication of caregivers everywhere. Each week, we'll offer insights, encouragement, and practical advice to support caregivers and their families. Let's dive in and shine a light on these incredible young people who care for others so selflessly.
All right. Hi. So we're gonna to start our conversation off. Um, let's start with um, what are some time management strategies that work best for balancing school and caregiving? Because last time we talked a lot about like how it's important to kind of have this time management to be able to like take care of yourself while at the same time caring for the people you love. So what would you think is the best strategy to balance school, like if they're a young person, like how do they balance school and caregiving at the same time? Start.
Well, I think you need to set a schedule. Have a schedule set aside as to your time frames and what you're going to do. You need to plan it out. Know where you need to be at whatever given time, and then go from there. Sort it out. How much time you want to spend on doing your studies and getting everything together, how much time you got to give, and where you need to be with taking care of the person that you got to take care of.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna jump in. I'm sorry I'm late. Um, so I think along with the schedule, so because of where we are, you know, personally, I think it'd be helpful to have maybe like a white dry erase board, either in the home, right, or in the room with the person that's being cared for, right? That way there, because I know, like for me, like my OCD, like I'm robotic. Like I have to know how things are working. They're going to work that way every single day. So to be mindful of the person that's being cared for, I think it'd be good to involve them in the schedule making, right? And to keep them abreast. Like, okay, listen, I'm going to be leaving for 30 minutes at this time, or whatever the case is. But I think it's always good to keep the person that is being cared for in the process of creating the schedule, because it's easy for us, the caregivers, to say, okay, I need this break, or I need this. But then what about the person being cared for, right? What are their needs? Again, I know they need needs. I understand that, but I'm saying as far as their comfortability and keeping them um, invested, right, in their own healthcare, right, is making sure that the person is being cared for has a say in, not a say, but they have some input in the decision making process when we start talking about scheduling, right? And again, I think it's good to have it either in a dry erase board, right there in the house or wherever it's located at. Also on the phone. That way, there it's easy accessible just in case something happens. The caregiver can share it with anybody else, like a shared document kind of thing. Again, we're just trying to make sure that the system is running smoothly, that everything stays on schedule, right? And then it's not a major calamity if something got accidentally erased off the dry erase board, or maybe the person being cared for forgot that the primary caregiver was going to be away for a whole day or whatever the case is, because these things happen. And then, when one small thing goes away, that could throw a lot of things out of whack. And then it takes time to get back on the schedule. So I think definitely having it written down somewhere, as a shared document, and then also having the person that's being cared for have some input and to say.
I agree with that,
Yeah.
City, because everybody needs to be on the same page and know what's going on. And I like that you said to include the individual in with it, because a lot of times if you don't, and they see somebody and they don't really key into that, you're going to have a whole different issue going on with them being involved. I agree. They have the input and they feel like they had it. You didn't leave me out. You didn't just tell me what you want me to do. So they have to feel included.
No, that's a perfect way to say that because I think, and again, I'm talking from a standpoint of the person being cared for is a senior
Yes.
human, right? And most of the time, us senior individuals, we have our own ways. Like this, I've been living this for a long time. I know how to take my own medicine. I know which medicine I'm supposed to take. We get a little ornery, So again, just not taking that independence away from the person being cared for, but actually inviting them to have say. And also to your point, like I said, like to give them a responsibility. Like if you know I'm going to be leaving, you know what we're doing and you know how to do some of this stuff. So again, I think there's a lot that can be beneficial. Have the schedule, invite everybody to be a willing and active participant, kind of helps things run a little bit smoothly.
Yes.
Okay, that's really good. So, and going along with that, like we said like do a schedule, make sure to consider the other person. Um, how like a lot of people, especially people like me who like people pleasers, we think like how can like people use like this quote unquote me time that we put aside, right? Without feeling very selfish, especially when it's like older family members. Like as we're talking about, like if my mom, for example, was ill, like maybe what happens if like, oh God, but I'm taking this time for myself when I should be taking care of my parent or my grandfather or whatever. How can you kind of combat that kind of selfishness that most people feel when that happens? Anyone?
That's a good question, Karen.
It's a
Well,
hard one, I know.
well, it is hard. So I had this scenario last night. Now it's not the same, but you can kind of use it in the same context when we start talking about some things. So yesterday, my 4-year-old grandson, I kept him home from school. So we hung out because it was raining and I didn't really feel like dealing with it. So later on in the evening, after we have dinner and after he has his bath, now all of a sudden I say, hey man, look, he probably needs a break. I'm gonna watch some TV. But people just need a friend. Don't you want to be my best friend? Don't you want to sit with me? Now, this happens because when we're caregivers, you've been raised by this wonderful person, or maybe not, but you still feel like you don't want to let them down, and what's it if I just miss my 35-minute break, or what if I don't take my me time right now? It's not going to mean nothing. But now you set the precedence that if this person can say or give you a guilt trip, and I'm not saying all people do this, but if they can put that on you, then you set the precedence to then say, okay, well, then my me time is not that important. Like I've given that right up because what your needs are right now outweigh what I need. Whether that's fair or not, those are the realities. So I think, again, it's very, very important that if you have expectations in place, then the expectations need to be met and adhered to, right? Because guilt doesn't make anybody better. It doesn't make the person being cared for better, and it doesn't make the caregiver better. Guilt does not work, but it's a very tactical tool, right, to kind of get what you want. And then sometimes, maybe even the caregiver sees it as, you know what, I'd rather just give in to you so I don't have to deal with it. right? That deal with everything that comes with that. So, I think it's very important that the expectations are there and they are adhered to. Now, barring all emergencies, of course. But if we're going to have expectations and we're going to have a schedule, then let's stick to it.
Good. Anyone else want to add in, or are we ready to? Because I
No,
feel like
go ahead.
what he said is really good. I think like uh especially because as I said earlier, like I'm a very big kind of like if someone else is upset, then I'll be upset. It's kind of like that's kind of the person I am. And that kind of thing of being like we have the schedule, we have to stick to it, kind of goes back to like like a few months ago we were talking about boundaries and being like these are the boundaries I set and like I'm placing my foot down. And that's why I feel like what you said is very important to be kind of like it goes back to the whole boundaries thing of like you have to put your foot down and like boundaries isn't everything. Like there's no way it's used for literally everything. And that's why it's so important to know what they are and know how to set them and how to defend your boundaries when the time comes of like you said, like the guilt trip. Like not everyone's gonna do it, but like especially when um and like when they were like, oh, but don't you want to hang out with me? Like, are you gonna spend time with me or whatever? You need to be like, no, but I set this time off. Like you saw it on the whiteboard. We're gonna stick by the schedule, so everything is according to plan. It is hard to do. It's not easy, but it's for your own mental health. Because if you don't have that free time, I think anyone would go insane. I think. Um, so that being said, the next question I have. Oops. The next question I have is, what are some small self-care practices that can make a big difference for caregivers? Like we talked about free time, but is there anything else, like maybe something a bit smaller that someone can do that like even like let's say like it's during like while they're taking care of this other person, like what are some smaller things that like a caregiver can do to kind of help them through the like it's probably very difficult and stressful. Like what are some like techniques or ways that they can use? And you want to say?
A lot of times, what they can do is if they got somebody set in place already that's going to be watching over their loved one, they need to go and take a break. Explain to the person that I'm going and take a short break. I need to have this time for myself and I'll be back. Let sure they understand that I'll be back, but I need to take a break right now. And the person that's watching over you is going to be here and care for you, and you're going to be in good hands. But I will return. You ain't got to worry about it because a lot of time they're anxious once you leave, if you're leaving, because they want you right there with them. But for your own mental health, you have to take a break and let the other person know that's relieving you. I'm going to go and take a break right now and I'll be back and have that time frame set aside and then come back and take care of them.
And I think to add to that with the brace. So again, trying to be mindful of being in the moment and being intentional. Like, I'm in the middle of taking care of this person. And I got a life to live. Maybe I got young ones who are in school or maybe running around the house, or my spouse is maybe sick. That's real life. Like you're taking care of someone and then your spouse gets sick or one of your children gets sick. And now you got multiple people, entangled in this caregiving process, right? So I think you kind of have to outsmart yourself. And what I mean by that is, how do you stay a little bit stress-free and relieve some of the anxieties? Think the person that's being cared for, you have to, like I said earlier, involve them in this process, right? And what I mean by that is, you gotta, your spouse is sick in the other room. The children have to be picked up from school at this time or whatever the case is. And, you're the person you're, caring for, got some free time on their hands, right? I think you have to involve them in the process and give them some things to do, whether that's a crossword puzzle, whether that's painting, whether that's some kind of physical exercise that they can do in the bed or in their room or maybe outside if the facility is secure enough, right? But I think there has to be ways that as you're going throughout the course of your day and maybe you're in between your break times, maybe, you're between that 12:30 and 4 o'clock window break in that 12:30 to 4:30, you still got life going on. But the person really, maybe I don't want to say becomes agitated, just restless. I think as caregivers, sometimes maybe we fall naive to probably the level of boredom that might set into a person being cared for. I mean, you don't have nothing to do. So I think giving them some activities buys you a little bit of time, maybe some free space, maybe some time to go do this one thing, whatever the case is. So again, the schedule is important to that, but then also having the input or relying on that person being cared for to give them some small task, very small task. And again, I think the task should be relevant to what they can do. I don't think you want to give, someone a too strenuous task if that's not within their room, because then it's defeating the purpose. But something very small, or, again, just being mindful. Here's how you do. So I used to tell my kids when they go to school, you want to get the teacher off subject, have the teacher tell you something because teachers want to show you how smart they are. They want to tell you how smart they are, right? So the same thing with people that you're giving, ask them to tell you about when they was a kid or what they experienced in life. That's going to be 45 minutes. I guarantee you, because they want to tell you, they want to talk, and so you could be getting stuff done while they're talking away at the chair, at the counter, or whatever. Again, you have to kind of outsmart yourself and think outside the box when we're talking about freeing up some free time for yourself.
And I saw that Miss Abigail put simply go outside for a couple of seconds. That's also a really good one. Where it's not something huge. It doesn't have to be. Just going outside, maybe going out to not even that far. Maybe you have like a porch in your house. Maybe just going outside on that porch for like a minute or two, take a breather, then go back in is does wonders to someone. Um, and you were talking a lot about how to give them something to do and like to while you're trying to get like kind of quote unquote get away for a little bit. Um, a question I have is how are some ways that we can like that caregivers can find joy or fulfillment in this role of caregiving because it is stress after stress after stress after stress after stress. And even with that little free time that you do have, um, how can someone like still find joy even though like they're going through this very stressful situation? Yeah, despite the stressful situation. Just giving the hard answer.
Well, see, now you're talking about the metaphysics of life. Now, I'm not trying to get all in my education, platform here like I'm in a classroom, but we're talking about the metaphysics of life because now we're talking about the dichotomy of living, right? The dichotomy of living is eventually you're going to get sick and maybe move on to a different part of this existence of this being, right? And being a caregiver for someone terminally ill is a negative proposition to say the least, right? Inherently, it is a negative, undertaking because, and if we're talking about a loved one, a parent, a grandparent, maybe even a child, how do you find joy in providing care for someone you're going to lose physically? That is a very, very big ordeal to try to overcome. If you're not wired for that, and if you haven't already had the disposition to understand that, then it's already an uphill battle. Now, I don't want to sit here and say I have all the answers, and I'm not a caregiver. I'm not a expertise in clinical diagnosis of all. I'm not. But How do you find joy in that? Again, that comes from the internal makeup that you are, right? I think we talked about this last time. If you're there for the wrong reasons, it's probably not going to be too difficult. But if you're there because you're there for your heart, you're there for your heart and you're there for the right reasons, it's going to be very difficult. I don't know what the answer to that is. How do you find joy in that? You know, um, I'm not a spiritual person, but I'm sure spiritual people will have plenty of answers. How do you find joy in preparing for a transition of a loved one that you're providing care for? I think it really comes down to the individual's disposition and understanding the task that's been assigned to them. You know, um, and I heard this maybe about 2 years ago from a wonderful lady. When we start thinking about the things that our life puts in front of us, some of the challenges, right? And we have to understand, is it an ailment or is it an assignment? Right? Because at the age of 26, 27, I'm taking care of my mother along with my sister, and me not understanding the the gravity, the significance of life. I'm looking at it, oh, why me? Pity party. Why do I have to lose my mom? All of these things, right? As I get older and I look back, I understand it wasn't an ailment, it was an assignment. I had to go through that to prepare myself for these other trials in life that had to come with it. So again, I'm not going to sit here and get on the soapbox, but I do want to say, I think, how do you find joy in that? That's up to the disposition of the individual providing that care.
And I agree with that, Smitty, because it depends on what situation you in and how you was. With my mom, we talked about it. We're open. I know a lot of people don't talk about death and dying and what they're gonna do. She was prepared. She knew what she wanted, and she was so spiritual that she knew she wanted to be with Jesus, and she wanted to have that relationship. And we talked about what we do because she pre-planned her funeral and everything, and we as Black people really don't do that. We don't talk about it a lot. We don't go that step, so everything is like a big mystery once it's come. But she was prepared. So even though we were sad and wanted that, the joy in knowing that she was at peace and that she said that she was ready to go, and she wanted that peaceful moment so that she'll be able to spend her lifetime with being on the other side with Jesus. And it depends on the person, because a lot of people are not spiritual. They don't have that connection. But when you have that connection, we were at peace. We got to talk to her. She got to say what she wanted. She got to plan out what she wanted or what she thought it was going to be like. She got to participate in how she wanted her program to run or whatever the case may be. So when they're at peace, you get a sense of peace too, and knowing it. And even though you're gonna be hurt in the end that you're losing your loved one, it makes it a little easier, because when they're talking about it and they're ready, when she got tired of being sick and said, I don't want no more chemotherapy, I don't want to go through this anymore. So I said, okay, I'm with you. Whatever you feel that you want at that time. And we was ready for it. We made sure that we tried to plan anything that she wanted to do that was a pleasure to her while she was still able to go after all the chemotherapy and she said she was done. We make sure we did, because doctors plan, they give you a limit, but doctors don't know. They don't know when you're going to go. They can say that. They gave her the 6 months. She lived a year or more after that. Um, and we did everything that we could to keep her comfortable and make her comfortable, to bring her some joy. What is it that you want to do that you haven't done or whatever? So you try and plan it out and fix it so they can do it. And your peace comes in the joy of knowing that they're at peace. But, and that's all you can do.
And I agree with Mama Darlene, like that preparedness goes a long way. Preparedness, having conversations about this before you even get to the point of caregiving, can alleviate some of the anxiety. You know, I'm not going to sit here and ever say it's going to bring you joy. Again, to like Mama
No.
Darlene's point, you know, you're losing a loved one. But if that's a great point. I think if the person being cared for is at peace with their decision and where they are in life, it's probably a little bit more easier on the caregiver, you know. And I know for me that those 3 years were trying, they were challenging, and I'm not going to sit here until I ever got peace, but I do know I did have a conversation with my mother, and it went sort of something like, "Mom, I know why you're doing this, but it's time to let go." And we had that conversation, a really quick 10, 15-minute conversation. And I have to say, once I had that conversation with my mother, I was good. Now, I wasn't happy, but I was good. I was comfortable. And I think looking back on it now, uh, it wasn't joyful, but I did feel better once, you know, we had that conversation. So maybe a conversation will suffice if you haven't had that conversation.
It gives you
Mm.
that closure that you need. Because a lot of people, when they going through, they don't get that closure because they start coming around. Okay, if that's your loved one and you don't come because I can't take it. Well, if you can't take it, how are you gonna get peace? How that person gonna feel that you're not showing up for them? They've given you everything that they could possibly give to try and help you throughout your life, and then you decide that you can't take it, so I can't be around them, I can't go and be with them. And that's a good time to involve your kids and everything in that, because kids gonna remember they had that grandparent. And if you don't bring them around so they can get that closure and let them know, okay, grandma is sick, grandma probably ain't gonna be here for much longer, so let your kids come in, have that conversation, talk to them, give them that time to spend with them so that they can at least know, well, I spent time with grandma, I did this, I was able to help out for a little while, I was able to give her a glass of water, even if it's just a sip. You know, you help. You was there. They know you was there. And that's gonna help them have that closure that they ain't gonna have, because once they disappear, your kids are gonna still be asking, where grandma? Why ain't she here? What happened to grandma? They gonna miss her. But if you brought them around and explain what was going on so they'll know and be prepared, that helps prepare the young person too for what's going on and how they're going to live their life and what they're going to go on. And then they'll be able to remember, well, I did this with my grandma before she passed. I helped out. You know, it goes a long way. You got to have some type of closure at the end.
Hold on, Jackie wants to speak, but I can't allow her to unmute. If Miss Abby can let her unmute so she can talk. Um, because she wants to say something.
I got it.
You got it? Okay, cool. I want to make sure that you got it because I know you came in late.
So she had mentioned, Miss Darlene had mentioned that, allowing the parents to talk to the children so they could have that closure. And I really love and appreciate that she had mentioned that, because some parents don't realize how important that truly is. And I say that based upon I lost my grandparents at a very, very young age, and my parents didn't realize how important that was for myself and my brother, and actually their siblings didn't either. And myself and my cousins didn't have closure. We struggled with it, and we struggled with it for life. So there's that peace again, right? You struggle with peace and coming to finding that closure. So in talking about that, like finding joy, we all had to find joy in our own way with the passing of my grandparents. And some of us just learned to talk about the happy times. And some of us just don't talk about it at all because there was no closure. But that can be unhealthy.
Anyone want to say anything to that? Or
I think I had talked on it last week, but yeah, the closure, especially with grandparents, I never got to meet my grandfather, so that was very, you know, challenging as I got older. Um, so involving the family, again, to both of those points, like involving the family could possibly bring that caregiver some joy. Seeing that connection, the legacy, you just going from parent to child, grandparent to child. I saw, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
right. So one one thing um one of the questions that I have that feel like fit the kind of conversation we're having is how can we talked a bit about like having that closure and finding joy and kind of being there for the person that we were caring for. How can caregivers prepare for the unexpected in caregiving? Kind of like medical emergencies or it happens sooner than planned. Like maybe like it wasn't like the family member didn't like say like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm prepared to go. It just kind of happened. Um, how how can they prepare kind of for the quote unquote worst um in those scenarios?
There is no preparing for the worst. It's gonna happen. It's the spur of the moment, and then you just gotta deal with what you gotta deal with. You can't prepare for the unexpected. You just gotta deal with it when it happens.
And I agree with that. You know, I have a religious family, and I think a lot of them um, choose to accept, you know, what their calling is or what the other, the family's calling is. Um, you know, emergent, so the universe is fluid. I'm not trying to get all, let's say social, all in the mind and stuff. But the universe is fluid. And like Mama Darlene said earlier, like the doctors can say stuff, but they don't know. They give you 3 months to live and you live for 5 years. You know, um, the unexpected is going to happen. I think it goes back to what we just talked about being prepared and having conversations. You know, um, where do you stand with yourself and your loved one? What does that dynamic look like? Have you brought closure to any, you know, historical events that might be in the way, that might blind you or inhibit you from making the right decision? I think some of the things that I've come to see as I've gotten older is the lack of preparedness, the lack of a will, the lack of power of attorney. The lack of power of attorney that broke up many of good families, because of the emergency, the unforeseen. You think, oh, I'm going to live forever, or this person's going to live forever, and we ain't got to talk about it because that's not what we do. No, I'm sorry. You need to talk about it, especially if you have a large family, or if there's multiple. You know, when we talk about emergencies and what we don't talk about, we just think about the immediate intimacy of the person we're caring for and then, ourselves. But there's so many indirect parts to that. If that person owns a business and they have business partners, who's taking that over? Who's making those decisions? If there's multiple homes involved, where are those homes going? Who's paying the property tax? Are we going to probate? Are we you know what I'm saying? It becomes this ugly, ugly, ugly thing. And so the emergency itself, as traumatic as it is basically the fuel that lights the wildfire for all these other things to take place. And the next thing you know, the caregiver is now not only dealing with the emergency, but the after effects of that emergency, right? Where you think loved ones who are going to participate and assist you, now there might be some animosity, there might be some ugliness, there might be some trauma that they never adjusted or got to get closure on. And it's just one big thing. So the emergency itself, as traumatic as it is, probably could be better dealt with if the other things like we've talked about were better prepared for the unforeseen emergencies. And again, like Mama Darlene said, and I think she said it best, and it's an unspoken truth. Like, we don't talk about these things because we're afraid to, we don't want to, it's uncomfortable. I don't want to talk about that day, Mama, I love you. No, if I love you, then let's talk about it because I want you to be okay. I need you to be okay because emergencies happen. That's why they're called emergencies.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, it's kind of like there's no true preparing for whatever happens, but it is important to kind of have that conversation so that when it does happen, it's not complete panic. Um,
Can
so
I follow up on that, Miss Karen? Can I follow up on that? Because it's so petty, but it's so reality. So again, this is probably a little bit too much information, but my mother has a twin sister. Now, my mother passed in what, 97, right? We had her cremated. We didn't think about nothing. We didn't think about 2023 when her twin sister passes, right? And now a conversation arises, well, we want them to be together. Okay, hold on. Where are they going to be? Like, whose house between? Because now not these two twins, they have children, and their children have children. Now, if you want them to be together, well, whose house they going to be at? Are they going to be revolving? You know what I'm saying? What happens when the children pass? Where are these ashes going? It is a very, very petty conversation, but it's a real authentic conversation. And I'll tell you, my family we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're doing, And let me add on to that. If we're talking about reality and we're talking about these adjustments and we're talking about caregiving and anxiety, my sister has my mother's ashes. I have my father's ashes. Now what? What happens when me and my sister move on? Where are those ashes going? Right? My sister has 3 children. I have 3 children. Again, we didn't talk about this. What do we do? So again, being prepared, having conversations, because real life happens. Again, I know that's a lot of information, but I'll be real with you. Like, I'll put that to anybody who's listening to this. What would you do? I'm not saying me and my family are upset at one another. We're not doing that. We're not bickering. We're not calling each other out our name. But it's a conversation going on. Like, okay, what do we do now? What do we do? Who's taking my pops? Who's taking my mother? So just real stuff to think about. Being prepared.
Yeah, because you got to have somebody that's willing to take it on. Once you pass on, who's willing to accept the next care for the ashes?
Absolutely, because we can't just dump them out. That's a biohazard, and I'll be fine. So.
I love that you mentioned that because people also face those decisions when they're burying somebody. Like, for example, up in New York, or anywhere, you have the cemetery. Are they going in a wall? Are they going in the ground? Some people don't want to go in the ground and they want to go on the wall. And with my family, my mom and dad argued over it for a while because my father didn't want to go in a wall. He wanted to be outside amongst the birds and the animals. And they had to come to the conclusion, okay, well, one child's out of state, one child is in state. What are we going to do? So, it matters to a degree, because if one parent passes on, you have that caregiver that has to make all those decisions. And what if they can't handle making those decisions? If both pass, now you have the children, making those decisions. And like you said, Smitty, what are they going to do with the ashes? So it's a very good point.
Right. While we were talking about this, I feel like this question fits the best. I think we talked a bit about this last time. But with this whole thing, putting it into this context, how do you recommend approaching family members about this kind of stuff? Like it says here caregiving tasks, but I want to like specifically talk about like this thing that we were talking about of like how do you kind of approach someone and be like, hey, this is what's happening, this and that. Who for people who like never done it before, right? It's not a conversation that you have every day. So anyone wants to do some tips and tricks?
Darlene, you want this?
I'm going to need you to repeat that question.
The question was, how do you recommend caregivers approach family members about quote unquote sharing caregiving tasks, or in this case, what we were talking about of having that kind of hard conversation with other family members about who's going to deal with this now?
Timing. It takes timing, because if they don't want to talk about it, because I remember I had a family member, because at first when we approached it with my mom, she had not thought about it or discussed it or wanted. So then we start off with, do you have somebody that you want to be over the decision making? Because if you get where you can't talk for yourself, and you got to sit them down and try to explain it real simple so they can understand. If you come to a space where you cannot make decisions for yourself anymore, is there someone you want to be able to speak for you, and what are your wishes? Have you thought about making a will? Have you thought about making doing a healthcare surrogate? Have you thought about a living will, that you can have? Well, one of the family members didn't want to talk about it at all, because why are we talking about this? So, I ain't finna die now. But people need to know what your wishes are. What do you want done in case you die tomorrow? What is it that you expect from others? So some were willing to talk about it and say, okay, well, when I go to die, I don't want to be on life support. I don't want to be held here no longer than I have to. So if I come to that stage where you have to make that decision with me, I want you to know I don't want to be put on life support. I want to just be able to go with medication. You can put me on hospice if that's what it needs to be, so that I can go comfortably and know that everything is going to be taken care of, and they're going to be able to do my wishes. Now, a lot of time, if you don't make your list of what you want done with you, it's up for grabs. My brother did not want to make any decisions about if he was going to die because he's not going to do it right now, and we ain't going to talk about it. We're not going to do anything that I want to live forever. And so you're going to do everything you can to save me. If if I'm in the hospital and I'm sick and get ready to die, tell them to save me. So, okay. So it depends on you. You got to take your time and explain it to them and make sure they understand. If you have the paperwork, have the paperwork right there with you so they can see it and know what's on that list of what things you got, because they do offer the paper so that you can have and make choices, and you're making that choice according to what you want. So it's a just a conversation piece. You got to sit and patiently go through it with them so that they can understand and let them know what they need to do and how they need to go about it. But get them to try and talk and tell you what they want.
And then I would add to that, like, I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question to, because I'm pretty upfront. You know, fortunately, it was just me and my sister, so we didn't have a lot of people we had to, conversate with. But I would encourage, because we're talking about transition and the financial impact that comes from transitioning of a human being. If you are not upfront as the caregiver, there's going to be problems, and I think the way traditionally, when people start appointing the powers of attorney or who's going to be the spokesman for the will or whatever the case is, it generally goes to the strong-willed person in the family, which is unfair, but it is what it is, because now that person has the responsibility to disseminate the wishes of this person. And now some people might look at that and put that on them like, oh, you're just doing that. Hey, look, that's just what comes with it. I would say for anybody that's going to, or may has I don't know how, if it's not unfortunate and it's not a good thing, but if you have to become a caregiver for a loved one or for someone you care about, being open and honest with what's happening, first and foremost, with the people that's immediately involved, whether that's, children, whether that's grandchildren, whether that's siblings, right? Because another problem I know me and my sister faced was we are the children, but my mother had, 14 brothers and sisters who all thought they had input on how we was operating. And again, me being who I am, I put a stop to that real quick. I understand you might be her brother and her sister, but I'm her son. And my sister has given me the power to say what I had to say, and we're going to do this the way that keeps me calm, you know. So you have to kind of be forward. You don't have to be disrespectful, and I don't think I was, but you have to be forward about how we're going to operate this, because it is a big undertaking, and if you're beating around the bush and then you're not saying what's on your heart and you're not saying the things that are going to get this thing done operate, it just becomes a mess. So how do you have that conversation? By being upfront, and being honest.
I agree.
Final quick question before we finish off today. Let me see if I can find what I was looking at earlier. Hold on. One that I have here, because we talked a lot about if they were like adults and stuff, but I feel like this also applies to adults, I guess, is how can, like, if they're still in school while this is happening, how can, like, they can talk to like teachers about what's happening, be like, hey, like, I need some help with like some assignments and stuff because I'm doing this at the same time as schooling. Um, how can you like start that conversation, I guess? This also applies to work too, like if it's affecting your job, it's important to let your job know. But how can you start that conversation with like your supervisors?
So I know here in California, um, you can do so independent study is really not a norm anymore, not here in California. They do have short-term independent study, which lasts for 10 days. If you need to have that extended, um, then under certain circumstances, I'm sure you can run it up to the school board or the superintendent and ask for extended time for that student to be at home, because that's another added responsibility if we're talking about transportation of children going back and forth to school, right? But then also we have to be mindful that maybe even that student is the caregiver to mom or dad or grandparents, right? So you also have an option of homeschooling. I know here in the state of California, you can't transition. I want to make sure I say this properly. Within the rules, you can transition to homeschool, but there has to be immediately medical reason behind that. Okay. Because and this is all convoluted, but the union with the teachers don't allow for that to happen. So as long as there's a medical reason behind it, they'll allow for that transition. And then I also do know here in the state of California, and I think it's nationwide, correct me if I'm wrong, sis, I think you know this better than I, but there's a caregiver stipend that you can receive if you're the sole provider of care for an elderly parent or another loved one within your family. So there are ways to do that, whether it's work, whether it's school. But again, you have to know the process, and then you just have to reach out. I know here in California, it's called Care Solace. You can reach out to them. They're a good resource to kind of help you navigate how do you do that, either as a student or as a working professional.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for helping us out. I'm going to send it over to Jackie to close us out.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for joining us for Talk Tuesday as we honored the role of family caregivers, especially our young caregivers. Their strength, resilience, and dedication deserve recognition. And we hope this series has provided valuable insights and support for those balancing caregiving with personal life. Family caregiving is a journey filled with both challenges and rewards. And we are grateful to have shared resources, tips, and inspiration with our listeners. Remember, you are not alone in this role. There is support, guidance, and community available every step of the way. Before we go, don't forget to check out our upcoming events at STEPS Foundation. We would love to invite students to join our programs, and there's still space available both virtually and at BVL Library. Our programs are a fantastic way to connect with peers, build essential skills, and have fun while learning. Plus, it's a great opportunity to expand your network. Mark your calendars for our special events this month. On November 23rd, we're hosting a family walk in the park at Kissimmee Lakefront, a perfect way to enjoy some fresh air and quality time together. And yes, it's a walk in the park. Then on November 30th, get ready for a night of mystery and intrigue at our Underwood Cellars Murder Mystery event at Hart Memorial Library. You can register for all events by visiting our website at www.stepsfoundation.org/events or by following us on social media at Step Foundation Inc. We hope to see you there. Caregivers, remember that the impact of your work goes beyond daily tasks. You're making a difference in the lives of those who depend on you. Take pride in each act of kindness, each day of dedication, and know that you are valued. To all caregivers and their families, we see you, we support you, and we appreciate you. Keep checking our website for resources. Stay connected with the community, and remember to take time for yourselves as well. We'll see you next time on Talk Tuesday.